Africa Day is in a few days' time. What would you say South Africans and Africans in general should be celebrating?
Well, I think what we need to bear in mind about Africa Day is that the day was set to commemorate the foundation of the Organization of African Unity. So Africa Day really therefore wants to emphasize the point to all of us as Africans that we all of us share a common destiny, and hence the need for Africa to unite, because we need that combined strength in order to ensure that all our countries succeed in terms of development, plus that we need that combined strength to ensure that Africa occupies its rightful place among the nations. So when we celebrate Africa Day, I think we want to renew this pledge to work towards the unity of the continent, to work towards a common action to address the challenges that face the continent, challenges of democratization, challenges of peace, challenges of the struggle against poverty and underdevelopment, and that we need to use this day to assess where are we now with regard to those challenges, where are we with regard to advancing towards this level of integration on the continent, which is really fundamental. It's fundamental to the success of our countries individually, and fundamental to the success of the continent collectively.
How do you appraise African integration? What is your assessment? What is the progress? What do you think we should be doing in order to expedite it?
If you look, for instance, at the issue of the policies that the continent needs in order to chart its way forward, I would say the continent has made a great deal of progress, in the sense that there's a whole body of policy about many things, agreed policies, like what we should do in order to ensure that the continent becomes a democratic continent, with all sorts of various policies, ideas, means, and so on, to achieve that objective. Policies that address issues of peace and stability, including the institutions to advance that struggle for peace and stability. Issues that relate to the African economy, what needs to be done in order to achieve development, in order to fight against poverty, to fight against inequality. Policies that relate to the gender question, what to do about women's empowerment, so across the board, on children, issues of terrorism, and so on. So I'm saying that I think from that policy side, the continent has really made great advances in terms of evolving common policies that really ought to define where the continent is going. I think also progress is being made. If we look at this process of the integration of the continent as being a bottom-up process, I think a lot of progress has been made with regard to issues of regional integration in Southern Africa, in West Africa, in East Africa, and so on, which constitute the necessary building blocks towards the integration of the continent as a whole. So it's now possible for the African continent to speak with one voice about itself, and to speak with one voice about its relations with the rest of the world. I think all of those things really amount to good progress that is being made towards integration and the unity of the continent.
President,
you interact a lot with different sections of society, including young people. Very often we hear young people asking, why should we celebrate Africa Day, including many other holidays, many other days. What would your message be to young people?
Well, I think the youth should bear in mind that I think they have a particular responsibility with regard to this matter. The older generations fought for the emancipation of the continent. Liberation was achieved, independence was achieved. So the next task, one of the next tasks then becomes, what do we do with that liberation? And clearly the issue of the eradication of poverty, the eradication of underdevelopment becomes a strategic challenge. And it's a challenge which the youth must address, to see what it is that needs to be done by the continent acting together to address those matters of the struggle against poverty and underdevelopment. And the issue that we've been talking about of regional integration, for instance, is very important with regard to that. So even issues of establishing stable democracies on the continent, in part, surely, certainly to ensure that we empower the people, but also to ensure that the continent has the ways and means by which it addresses its conflicts and tensions in a peaceful manner, so that whole struggle to build a peaceful continent remains a challenge. The issue of the emancipation of women, of gender equality, remains a challenge on the continent. So I'm saying that the youth need to understand that the burden to address all of those issues, to achieve further advances, the burden rests on their shoulders. And also bearing in mind that I think the point is established, that we would succeed better if we act together as Africans, rather than that each country views itself as an island. Because in practical terms, the people of Africa don't see themselves in that way. People cross borders very easily. They've got relatives and friends across borders, and they trade across borders, and so on. So the people themselves see themselves as Africans, and everywhere you go on the continent, they identify themselves as Africans. And so I'm saying that in addressing all of these challenges, the youth also needs to bear in mind that these issues would be more effectively addressed if we're acting together as in unity.
The question of hope is a recurrent theme in your narrative about the continent. It's there in I'm an African, where you say, and I'm paraphrasing, whatever the cynicism of the moment, whatever the skeptics say, Africa will be free. And yet when crises emerge on the continent, hope seems to ebb away. How important is hope, in your view, to the ability of Africans to resolve our challenges on the continent?
No, I think if I think we should have at all times be conscious of what is happening on the continent as a whole. You have these problems which erupt now and again. We're talking now about Cote d'Ivoire. We haven't spoken about countries like Somalia, with serious problems. But it's not as though those conflicts represent what is happening on the continent. The bulk of the continent is at peace. It's not at war. The bulk of the continent is developing. And indeed, you look at all manner of analysis that have been made. Everybody is saying, remarking about the way the African economies are recovering and growing. So I think what is happening on the continent must give us hope. If you look around the continent, you would see that there are so many positive things that are happening. But I think also, even if you look at this, we're talking now about Sudan. Where you get the Africans to engage these challenges, these African challenges themselves, you achieve progress. The negotiations going on now in Sudan to sort out all of these challenges of the country, these are negotiations that are being handled by Africans, by Sudanese, assisted by other Africans, and I'm quite sure that we will end up with positive outcomes. And again, I'm saying that very fact that as Africans we can engage our own challenges and solve them should also give hope to our people that whatever other problems we're likely to face in future, we do indeed have the capacity. We do indeed have the capacity to solve these problems. But I think if you look at the continent as a whole, the continent communicates a very, very positive message in all respects, with regard to issues of peace, with regard to issues of economic development, with regard to issues of democratization and so on. I think the continent is advancing. There is a better tomorrow that is coming, and that indeed we have the capacity to make that tomorrow better.
The Thabo Mbeki African Leadership Institute has invited President Ben Mkapa to deliver this year's annual Africa Day lecture. Why President Mkapa?
We thought we should request President Mkapa to come and deliver the Africa Day lecture this year. Well, as you know, President Mkapa comes from Tanzania. We have a long history of relations with Tanzania. Ben Mkapa was one of the people who was brought up by the late Julius Nyerere and carries those ideas which Julius Nyerere had, carries them forward, reflects them in his own thinking. And as you would know, those ideas which Mwalimu had were about African unity, were about recognition of the fact that no African country should see itself as being successful if other African countries don't succeed. Very sharply focused on the matter of human upliftment, that what really we're about is people. Whatever the policies and the programs and the institutions and so on, you want to build a people-centered society. So, we thought that Ben Mkapa would be very appropriate in terms of looking at all of those things and putting them in today's context, to say, given our actuality, the reality of today, what do we do to make sure that we advance that agenda?